Welcome into a brand new edition of Bleav in Heels Hoops. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson, joined by my co-host, R.L. Bynum from the Tar Heel Tribune. Special guest host, Pete Chilcutt in the house. We got a lot to talk about in the world of college basketball and in the world of Heels Hoops. We are your spot to be each week to get an update on the men's basketball team in Chapel Hill. We'll talk about the Heels' 2 victories since the last time you saw us, a rock fight at Virginia, 54-44 victory, and then a special victory at the Dean Dome Monday night. RJ Davis with a career night as the Heels defeat the Hurricanes. We'll talk about those 2 games. We'll look at the ACC standings, see where Carolina is in terms of the upcoming ACC tournament. That's 2 weeks. So looking forward to that. It's in DC, I Bleav, this year, if I'm correct. So right. Yeah, so we'll look at that, see what the seeding is with all that going on. Pete will talk a little bit about maybe a scoring situation he may have been witness to during his time as a player at Carolina, similar to what RJ did on Saturday. If you didn't miss it, go back and watch that game because it is a gem. I'm actually thinking about rewatching it myself. RJ had a couple of threes that were just like, oh, okay. Okay, he's really feeling it tonight. It was like heat check after heat check. So we'll get into all that as well. And then while I've got both of you guys here, I want to talk about the court storming topic that everyone's been focused on after the Duke-Wake Forest game on Saturday. Wake Forest pulling off the upset over 8th-ranked Duke at the Joel and Winston. First time in, I Bleav, 12 years they had defeated Duke at home. And, of course, the main story ended up becoming the court storming by the fans. Kyle Filipowski gets in the melee. I don't know. I've watched it now a couple of times. I see a leg getting stuck out, but maybe that's just the Carolina in me. I don't know. So we'll get into all that and whether or not you guys think court storming should be legal or should they avoid it, because you can't do it in the NBA. So we'll talk about all that as well. Before we get any further, though, I do have a couple of I do have a read I need to get through for Bet Online for you guys, and then we'll jump into it. Bet Online continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favorite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to Bet Online today to become part of the team and to remember to use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. And where we'll start, we will rewind it back to last Saturday. The Heels going up to John Paul Jones Arena to take on the Virginia Cavaliers, Virginia Cavaliers. They scratch out 154-44 in a game, guys, that kind of felt close, but kind of didn't. It felt like Virginia just didn't have enough on offense to really do this. And once Carolina got past 45, 48 points, it felt like, okay, we're we're okay, we're good to go. Thoughts on Virginia? Because I don't know if I would say they're a tournament team, to be honest. I saw a stat, they've scored 130 something points in their past 3 games. They're averaging 43 points a game or something in college basketball, Division I, ACC basketball. Thoughts on Virginia first before we talk about Carolina. Pete, we'll let you go first here.
Well, that style of play is obviously we're used to it by now, and it's effective. I mean, what they're trying to do, they really do accomplish. But we've talked about them having better personnel on the offensive end in the past years. It makes it a little bit more bearable because they could score more efficiently. That game in Virginia was one of those games where I kept on thinking, why aren't we up more? They haven't hit a shot in it seemed like 5 minutes. And that was my little worry in the first half, was we weren't extending the lead enough. But then, like you mentioned, you remember it's Virginia. You don't really need a big lead. And if you really look at those stats at the end of the game, we didn't really shoot much better than they did. It was just an ugly battle that we got the lead in and we're able to hold them off. But that style of play is tested, but I don't know that it travels well. So I'm not sure once they get away from that home court, it just takes one game where they're not really dialed in defensively, and they won't be able to score enough to win those games. So I'm not sure where they are on the tournament projections right now, but it is a solid form of defense that they employ, but they really don't have that offensive punch this year.
They really bothered Armando in that contest too. Which isn't surprising. Armando he usually doesn't play very well against Virginia anyway. A lot of players don't. RL, what were your thoughts coming away from that 54-44 Carolina win in a game where I think with 4 minutes left in the first half, Virginia was sitting at 8 points, if I'm not mistaken. What were your thoughts on this contest here?
I mean, for the better part of the last 10 minutes of the first half, Cormac Ryan had more points than Virginia.
Yeah,
it was just crazy. My eyes are finally recovering from watching that in person. That was just ugly basketball. But the way they pack it in with the defense and over help, if you pass quickly and use screens, you get open in the perimeter, and that's the flaw of the pack line defense. And Cormac Ryan kind of took advantage of that because he was sinking them. So that was the big part there. If you told me that RJ Davis would make one field goal and it would go well at Charlottesville, I would not have believed it. But thanks to Cormac Ryan, it worked out. And you just have to hope that RJ doesn't have a shooting game like that on the same game that Cormac has a shooting game like he had, I guess, against Miami. That might not go well.
So Cormac, 18 points, 15 in the first half against Virginia, 6 3-pointers. Honestly, without Cormac on Saturday, I don't know if Carolina wins that game. But then again, that was the type of game that we've watched this Carolina team under Hubert Davis. They would have lost this game the past 2 years in terms of just there's certain moments in the second half where a Carolina player will kind of just take control of the offense. And we saw it on Monday with RJ when Miami was pushing to tie or to get close. RJ would kind of just take command of whatever they were doing. And everyone kind of just, I call it the old Chicago Bulls, get the hell out the way play for Jordan. Like just, he's not passing this ball, like that type of thing. And RJ just felt it on Monday. We'll get to that in just a second. On Saturday, though, RJ and Armando struggled. RJ had 12 points all in the second half. Armando only had 10 points and 13 rebounds. It was just, we thought it was going to be that kind of game when we previewed it last week, that it was just going to be a rock fight, and it was. So there's not really much more to go through with this one, because it was 26-16 at the half, Carolina with the lead, and then they both scored 28 points in the second half. So it was a Virginia game. The Miami game, though, a little bit more exciting. Carolina wins 75-71 to move to 22-6 on the season, 14-3 in conference play. A little bit of a different game from RJ Davis. 42 points, a career high. And he came in hot to begin with. He was the only player for Carolina to score in double figures on Monday. Norchad Omier had 22 points. I was actually really impressed with him from the Miami side. And Miami played to their credit. I know that they've been struggling. I think they've lost 7 straight. They're 15-14, 6-12 in conference play. They're not going to have a above 500 record in conference play. They looked like a tournament team at the beginning of the year, and then they just kind of hit a stretch in the ACC where it just kind of the wheels fell off. Thoughts on that Miami team, and then thoughts on RJ. We've gushed about him every week we've been on, but he took it to another level in that Miami game where he almost was entering Steph Curry territory in terms of, like, when the ball was in the air, you kind of expected it to go in after a certain point. Just thoughts on Carolina, Miami. RL, will let you go first on that one there.
I don't know what it is about Miami. They've been struggling, 7 straight losses. Every game has been 8 points or more. There have been 2 of 20 points or more. But they only lose to Carolina by 3 in Coral Gables and 4 on Monday night. And that was without Poplar and Pack. So I don't get it. It's just the matchup, I guess. They did a good job of doubling Mondo and making it tough for him. But I guess that left some openings for RJ. But yeah, it seemed like everybody was enjoying the RJ show and kind of forgot that, hey, Miami still might have a chance to win this game, because the inability to break the press, the poor execution at the end, the missed free throws were pretty troubling, to be honest.
That was surprising. Yeah, the free throws were about to give me a stroke, because for some reason we just forgot how to hit free throws the last 3 minutes of that game, and it made it way closer than it probably should have been.
Except Withers.
Except for what? Yeah. The last ones. As long as we hit the last ones, we're good to go. Pete, your thoughts on the Miami game and RJ's performance?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll talk about just the game in general. First of all, Miami is a tough, scrappy team. You know, I've seen them play, I think, the game before in Coral Gables against Duke, and they just gave up almost. I mean, they got stepped on early, and it just seemed like they lost their fight. But it seemed like we didn't give them that extra kick in the head, and they just kept on fighting. And like you mentioned, it was a little troubling. Some of the stuff at the end of the games we got to handle better. Not necessarily the free throws, because that's just something we got to make, the free throws, but the pressure, it almost seemed like the lackadaisical passing, just the lack of focus down the stretch. That could very easily cost us a really important game, obviously, when we get in the postseason. So we got to be able to dial that in. And I know that Coach Davis covers that kind of stuff. It just seemed like you mentioned, maybe they're in awe of because I think with about 4 or 5 minutes left, it was about a 10-point game. And I think that's kind of lost the focus there down the stretch. Definitely got to work on that. RJ, though, unbelievable performance. I mean, some of those drives and hard step backs, and just the range. And like you mentioned, it seems like every time he puts it up, it's going to go in. It looks so comfortable. I even thought there was a couple drives there that he could have got some more points on. Lost some balls in the second half, and I just thought he just played outstanding. The fact that he is able to, I wouldn't say turn it on and turn it off, but to kind of realize that he took the aggressiveness up to a little bit different level. I think sometimes he just takes what he gets, and I thought he was definitely hunting his shot a little bit more, which is something that is good to see.
Yeah, I mean, all of what RJ did was good to see, but the disparity between him and the next highest scorer wasn't good to see. I mean, it was the biggest disparity since 1957. And as far as percentage of points, it was the largest since 1941. I mean, that I don't think that's sustainable. You can't count on RJ to do that kind of heavy lifting every game. And yeah, it was amazing. He had one from the where Murphy would be in the state outline. And then that step back three, unbelievable. I was in awe with what he was doing. But what, Pete was talking about how what Coach Davis talks about the passing, other than praising RJ in the post game, he sounded like it was a loss. And he was harping on that. I know they're spending a lot of time on post-entry passes because he was saying that they're trying to throw them from too far away and kind of doing leaning passes and kind of leading them rather than passing to their hands. So I think that's going to be worked on a lot between now and Saturday.
I do. I'm glad you guys brought that up because I kind of had forgotten about it over the past couple of days. The last 4 or 5 sequences of Carolina trying to inbound the ball and Miami applying the full court press on them, and they looked like they weren't prepared for it. And there was like a backcourt, there was a 10-second violation. I think Harrison Ingram traveled. They threw the ball out of bounds. Like it was 3 or 4 in a row where I was just like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what's happening here? Like, why do we keep giving the ball back to Miami?" And bless his heart, RJ Davis, man. The one where he took a hard drive and stopped and like stepped back and went behind his legs, through his legs, and then shot it. That's the one where I jumped out myself. I was like, oh, because at that point he was just on fire. And I was trying to rack my brain to the last time I could remember seeing a performance like that. And they said it during the broadcast. Harrison Barnes dropped like 40 on Clemson his freshman year. And I was like, okay, that's the last one I kind of remember. Pete, do you remember a player during your time? Was it you? that had
well, it was, and that was in middle school. But when I was at Carolina, there was a couple of performances that do stand out. And one was my freshman year. I did redshirt my freshman year, but Kenny Smith was down at Clemson, and I Bleav had 41, and was just, my memory serves me right. It wasn't as impressive as I just saw with RJ, but he was just really on with his three-pointer and just played really great. I had 41 at Clemson. The second one would be, and I can't remember actually who we played against, but Scott Williams, I think at that point may have been a Smith Center record. He was 12 for 12 from the field. and then had 7 free throws for 31 points. And just the fact that he had 12 for 12 was really impressive from the big fella. So, but yeah, Kenny Smith and it's hard, to imagine. I wasn't around for any of those ones in between, the Hansbrough and the Harrison Barnes, but RJ's has seemed so. I just felt like he could have kept on going. Like there was nothing they could have done to stop him. But it was really,
they had no answers for him really. In terms
and
of
he's in great company considering the last Tar Heel to outscore the rest of the team, Michael Jordan.
I heard that yesterday.
In 1983 against Georgia Tech. So that's pretty good company.
Yeah, it's pretty good company to be in. And now forget Player of the Year of the ACC. I think that's locked up for RJ. I think you really need to consider him National Player of the Year because I was sitting back thinking, I'm like, who else? Zach Edey, I guess, from Purdue.
Yeah, I think he may be the one.
I can't think of who else. It's going to be crazy if Caleb Love is in this category too at the end of the year. If Caleb Love and RJ Davis are National Player of the Year candidates, with Caleb,
I think for sure Caleb and RJ will both be their league's Players of the Year.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's really crazy. I saw a thing about Roy Williams, like pretty much his last full recruiting class, and how they're doing because all of them are pretty much different places now, except for RJ. RJ, of course, we know what he's doing. Caleb Love, we know what he's doing. I forgot Puff Johnson's at Penn State. Kerwin Walton is shooting like 45% from 3 or something like that, wherever he's at. I can't remember where he's at the moment.
He's at Texas Tech.
Texas Tech. And then there was another one too. Justin McCoy at Georgetown.
Justin McCoy hit like 26 the other night out in Hawaii.
So it's worked out for everybody. Sometimes.
Well, I don't know how much it's worked out for Dontrez. Georgetown's.
He started out strong. I remember seeing stuff about him early in the year, but I haven't seen much about him since. And I guess Georgetown kind of fell off, so that's probably why. But I thought it was interesting. The last class that Roy really had that was like 5-star kids and that kind of thing, that they all moved on to other places and they're all doing their thing. So. And RJ is shining. This is really, honestly, RJ's been in the shadows for most of his career at Carolina until this year. Even the Final Four run 2 years ago, it's Caleb Love you see in the silhouettes and the still frame shots and the iconic moments and that kind of thing. It's usually Caleb Love's shot or whatever it is. But RJ was probably the best player in that run throughout. The Baylor game in particular stands out as a game that RJ really shined in when they needed him. And now he's getting all the flowers he really deserved the whole time. So I'm really happy for him and hope they can keep this up.
That's even more than he ever scored in high school. His best game in high school was 41, he was telling us.
When he got to like 30 or 31 and there was still a whole lot of time left on the clock and we were kind of in a dogfight, I was like, he's gonna get to this record, but I didn't know he's gonna get to 42. So shout out to RJ. We needed every single one of them too, because no one had scored more than, what was it, 8, I think, for Carolina. Nobody else is in double digits. It's the most points for a Tar Heel player since Shammond Williams scored 42 in a 98 double overtime win at Georgia Tech. I'm going to talk about shooters. Shammond Williams was a shooter. So Carolina's ranked 9th this week in the AP poll, 22-6, 14-3 in conference play. And I'll pull up the standings here as we typically do each week so we can take a quick look and just kind of see where everybody is. And teams to keep an eye on as we go forward in conference play. 3 games left for the regular season for Carolina. I think I went too far. There we go. And as I expand this, it'll let me. So you got Carolina in first, 14-3. Duke a game and a half back. The only 2 teams ranked in the ACC this week. Virginia is still in 3rd place, but 3 games back. They're pretty much out of it. They can't get that 1 seed. Clemson is now in the 4th seed, and that's the one spot we've been looking at really the past 2 weeks, that 4th seed, because that's the last one we'll get a double bye in the ACC tournament. And you got this glut here. I'll ask you guys again: Clemson, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, and I guess Florida State and NC State. Well, no, I think they're too far back. So really, Clemson, Wake, and Syracuse. If you had to choose between those 3 teams right now, who's going to end up with that 4th seed? Who do you feel the most comfortable with? I was going to say Wake until last night when they lost to Notre Dame. So what team out of those 3 do you feel comfortable saying that they'll probably get that 4th seed in the double bye?
I'd still go with Wake Forest at this point, despite what happened last night. I think they're the best team there, but Syracuse has been playing very well, so they
I don't
have
know.
a
Yeah,
shot at one.
I don't know the remaining schedule of those guys who they got left, but I think Syracuse is playing really well. But I just like Clemson. I like their team. I don't know again who they have left, but yeah, that's a tough call. I'd probably go with Clemson if they can hold on to that forward right now.
All of them have flaws. We've seen all three the past couple of weeks. Wake probably had the most impressive win of the year versus Duke on Saturday, and we'll jump into the court storming thing here in just a bit.
And then I point out on Clemson and Syracuse play before the regular season is over, so that might be a key game as far as getting double bye.
Are you worried about Virginia falling further than they are? Because they can't score. They can't score. Who do they got? Let's see who they're playing.
Virginia's got to play Duke.
Ooh.
Let's see.
They got at Boston College, at Duke, and then they end with Georgia Tech at home.
Georgia Tech, right?
Yeah. I can see them. I can see them possibly dropping out. Yeah,
I can too. Especially if they're going to keep scoring the way that they aren't right now. Oh man, they really have a problem. Like I don't know what they can do to fix it in season, but in the off season, Tony Bennett needs to hit that portal and find some scorers. And I know maybe it's hard to find a scorer who also cares that much about defense, but the rest of them, let's see. So the Cavs are on a 2-game losing streak. Clemson's won 3 in a row. So they've kind of turned it around. And Syracuse has won 3 in a row. So they're kind of turning it around. The away records, though, are an indicator for me. Clemson 6-4 away from home. Wake 2-8. Syracuse 3-6. So, I mean, looking at that, I think we have Wake coming up here in a bit. They've got at Virginia Tech. Oh, no, we don't. We only played Wake once.
Correct.
So at Virginia Tech versus Georgia Tech and then versus Clemson. So actually Wake finishes the year in Blacksburg, and then their last 2 are at home. So that actually sets up nice for them. I'm not as worried about them since they beat Duke. I think that was kind of the big win they needed to get into the tournament. But I don't think they can just rest on their laurels either. They're going to need to win 2, well, preferably all 3 of those games. And then that gives you the 4 seed probably. I would say to feel completely safe, they probably need to get to semifinal Friday, I would think, being the 4 seed. At least get to where your seeding's supposed to have you. And then I think you're fine. But it's not completely over in terms of the standings behind Carolina. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that as we go into next week. Finally, we wanted to touch on, of course, what happened at the end of the Duke Wake Forest game Saturday, the court storming incident. There's many ways to look at this. I actually admin a Carolina Duke rivalry group on Facebook that gets feisty at times. And the Duke side was basically like, Wake Forest should forfeit the game. And I'm like, what? Like, that's a little extreme, isn't it? And the Carolina guys are more like, well, you clearly can see Filipowski puts his leg out and extends his arms or whatever. On one hand, I'm like, okay, I get it. You got kids rushing at you. It's a sea of humanity's running at you. But on the other hand, Duke was down 4 with 1.8 seconds left in the game. And you could clearly see on television that those kids were going to storm the court. Like, you could see it. So if I know it at home, they're going to storm the court. And everyone else out there knows you're going to storm the court. Why is Flip taking so long to get off the court knowing it's coming? It's almost like he expected them not to touch him because of the jersey he was wearing. Now, your thoughts on this, because I'm sure, Pete, playing at Carolina, you've had situations where a team has beaten you guys and they've stormed the court because it feels like that's what happens whenever you beat Carolina or Duke at home. If it's a typical year for Carolina or Duke, you're going to storm the court. I saw a stat in the last 37 road losses Duke has had, the court has been stormed 30 times. So this isn't a situation where you don't expect it to happen, Filipowski. Like, you have already had this happen to you already this year. So, like, I don't understand why it took so long to get off. And then the incident with running into the fans or whatever. Pete, have you been in a situation like that where you got to get off the court? I don't remember when I'm watching games like, in the 80s and the 90s. I don't remember it being such a big deal, like for the players to get off the court, or maybe the media just didn't focus on it like they do nowadays. But is there much of a difference in terms of back in the day when you played and today in terms of?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you guys, how far back, I think RL might remember this, but back in my day, Coach Smith had a firm rule. The game's over, you don't shake hands, you run off the court anyways. There is no handshake line at all.
Right.
Even if you knew a guy, he's like, talk to him before the game, don't talk to him after the game.
Was that for every game?
Every game.
Right. I mean, you would see routinely Carolina players would hustle.
Yeah.
Not walk, hustle.
You know what?
The dressing room right after the game, no handshake line, no nothing. And that was probably something that Coach Smith wanted them to do because he was worried about fans.
Well, yeah. And I'm not sure when it ended, but I think it was pretty soon after I left. I think they kind of got back into the line. I'm not sure exactly that timeline. But I have a little different take on this. And I'm going to go back also to Caitlin Clark. You know, I think the fact that you're going through on social media and at home and pausing it and looking at legs and saying Caitlin Clark flopped on her contact, and I think all that is ridiculous. To be honest, I think I would have liked to seen if that was Kyle got bum rushed basically. There was and if you've been on the court as a player, that is not a situation you want to be in. I would have liked to see him lean his shoulder in and just bull run over people. Like seriously, knock them out of the way. I wouldn't be opposed to him punching some people.
I've heard the sentiment from people. Yeah,
I think that would have forced somebody to make a decision more automatic, because it's not a situation you want to put players in. Just forget the fact that he was a Dookie and we all wanted him to get run over. It shouldn't happen after a game. I think they're talking about on one thing I was listening to where Larry Bird was punching people after a game one time and he was trying to get off the court.
I remember that. Yeah.
I have no problem with that. I don't think it's whether he stuck his leg out or not, I would have stuck my whole knee out. Like I'm not even looking. Like you want to protect yourself and you can't pussyfoot around and try to avoid the contact. You got to go in hard. Otherwise, you will get. He got spun around. It was just an unfortunate situation. And I watched the game last night. This morning on SportsCenter, they were talking about the guy who hit the half court shot for Cleveland.
Yeah.
Did you see the burly, mean-looking security guards that were no one was brushing that court? I mean, it can be done. It can be done.
Well, that's more of a college culture. I don't think that there's much rushing in the NBA.
In the NBA, it is well known. If you get on the court, you're going to be arrested. And everyone knows it when you come in there to watch the game. So no one even thinks about it. Doesn't even sound right to storm the court.
No, but I'm just saying that the security guards look like they meant business. And if you watch the tape of this Wake Forest game, the security guard was waving the students on the court. I mean, he was actually saying, "Come on, let's go." So it was. They got to do something. Either have a minute or two timer before they can do that or something. But that's kind of how
I do like that idea of having
I think the rules committee could come up with something when a game is clearly decided. Have it set up where the officials can call a timeout with 2 seconds left, get everybody off the court, and then play the last second and clear everybody out. I mean, there ought to be a way to control that in that manner where the security isn't doesn't have to face so many challenges.
We've had this happen to us this year at Syracuse, and I thought they handled it perfectly. The end of game blows, the handshake line's going on, but in front of the handshake line, they had security. Like you couldn't get on the court until they went through the handshake line. Both teams exited the court. Well, Carolina got off the court. Syracuse stayed out there, and then security let the crowd come out and storm the court or whatever. And that worked fine, and no one talked anything about it. And that should have happened at the Joel. I got to admit, as much as I'd like to blame Duke for whatever happened, I've said the Joel's mostly responsible for this. It's almost like the Joel didn't expect to beat Duke. Like they didn't expect to win. So they weren't prepared for it when it actually happened. But I mean, they had 14,000 people in the Joel on Saturday. They had tie-dye shirts on again. Like Skip Prosper would have been proud. Like that was an old school 90s, 2000 when Wake was like a top 10 team, like all like the Josh Howard teams, the Chris Paul, that was like a feeling like that in there on Saturday. And those kids, man, they've been waiting to cheer for something for years. So like it was a pent up expression of just love for the team. And it was a breakthrough win for Steve Forbes, which I was happy for because I love Steve Forbes. I've interviewed him a few times. I need to catch up with him. And I just thought it was a great win for Wake. And it made me feel bad in hindsight because the Duke fans used what happened with the crowd storming to talk about that and take the light away from what Wake actually did to Duke. Like Hunter Salas probably had the game of the year in that game. Like he literally kept them going, and it was probably the best game of the season in the ACC, if I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, neither team really was ahead more than 3 or 4 points the whole game. It was a back and forth. Haymakers were thrown, and in the end, it just Wake outlasted them and won a game that they needed at home to potentially secure a spot in the NCAA tournament. It had all the storylines you wanted, and Wake was on the winning end for a change. So shout out to Wake Forest because that was a huge win, not just for this year, but for Steve Forbes' program. Like this is his year 4, and they haven't had a big win like that in the whole time he's been there. So I just felt like the court storming took away from that, and the Duke fans gladly wanted to shift the focus over to here. Let's talk about Flip. He's hurt. They should forfeit the game. What's wrong with them? Act like you've been there. They haven't been there. That's why they acted that way. They're not Carolina. They're not Duke. They're not used to just winning because you're supposed to win. When you get a win,
and court storming's nothing new.
No.
50 years ago on Saturday, I was a little kid in Chapel Hill and was among the fans who stormed the court after Walter Davis hit the bank shot with 35 seconds left. I actually stormed after the overtime was over, but yeah, I mean, I still have the tape where I can see myself jumping up and down there.
Were you scared?
Yeah,
it didn't
fill the court. It was about maybe 40 or 50 of us out there. It wasn't like the Wake Forest scene.
Oh, okay. So, because I was as a kid, was it like overwhelming for you to be a part of that and be out there? And then, but 40, 50 people out in the court's a little different than.
I'd like to see that video.
Yeah,
I could get that video, and you could see me in the yellow shirt and the blue jeans.
I've never.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I was on the first step of the aisle behind the baseline. Mitch Kupchak threw the inbounds pass right in front of me when Walter hit the shot. So yeah, it was.
That would have won.
I'll never forget.
That was the 8 points in 17 seconds game.
Correct.
So you were there. Oh yeah. Which was crazy game between Carolina and Duke. And Carolina and Duke. By the time we come back, we'll be previewing Carolina and Duke because it'll be a week from this Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. That'll be the last regular season game. Yeah, so and we'll be traveling over to Cameron. Duke's been playing well as also up until that Wake Forest loss. Actually, they're probably playing better than anybody in the ACC until the loss at Wake. So, and I Bleav they've got Louisville today. So Duke's still got some work to do. It should. You never know in college basketball. Oh, but before we get out of the crowd storming thing, do you think they should ban it? Like, do you think that should be something that's banned in college basketball? You can't do it in any other sport.
I think the ACC should at least have some fines. I think ACC is the only Power 6 league that does not fine schools. At least have some kind of fine to try to discourage it.
Crazy thing is the ACC is the league where if you crowd storm or if you court storm, probably because you beat one or two teams. Like you either beat Carolina or you beat Duke. Like I can't think of anybody storming the court for beating Syracuse or Wake or State or you know what I mean. Like it's one of those two. If you beat them in your house, you're probably going to storm the court. And again, Syracuse did it on us earlier this year. And my only thing I can say to the Duke folks, they shouldn't have been surprised that Wake stormed the court again. The past 37 road losses Duke has had, the court has been stormed 30 times. So, like, you know it's going to be stormed if you lose in here. So just kind of, get out of the way a little bit faster. Like, it's not your fault, Kyle, but you didn't have to, like, lollygag to get off the court. You knew it was coming. So, and I don't know how hurt he was either. Like, because They really tried to play that out this week, didn't they? Well, it's his ankle. Well, I think it's his knee. I don't know.
Right.
See if he can practice. Like, come on, man. Like he ain't gonna play tonight. Like he's fine. He hurt himself when he stuck that leg out. That's where he got hurt. So, oh man,
probably be like a Grayson Allen suspension, indefinite. He'll be out indefinitely, which means he won't miss any game.
Yeah, to Pete's point, if Kyle had done what Pete suggested and just barreled off on someone and like just lowered somebody, that would have immediately put him on the Grayson Allen, Christian Laettner scale of just like Duke legends that everyone just despises going forward. Like it would have turned Filipowski into this villain because he's been flirting with it all year. Like some of the comments in the press and some of his play, he's a little feistier on the court, that kind of thing. He hasn't fully leaned into it yet, but I feel like before this year is over, we might see full-blown heel Kyle Filipowski like emerge and like take that role. Because to be honest, I feel like it's the only thing Duke's missing. They don't have that guy, like that one dude that like everybody points at and they're like, we don't like him, like because he's too good or he gets under my skin. They don't really have a guy like that, do they? It could be Flip. I would imagine Flip would be the one that everyone would target, but I can't think of anybody else. McCain's not, his personality is not really like that.
Little bit of with Roach, but not as much.
Yeah, a little bit. There's nobody that's really on this squad that where I'm like, okay, that's the pesky one. That's the one that's going to get on your skin, to do the Draymond Green, Dennis Rodman type antics or whatnot. There's nobody like that, but Flip could, and that would be an interesting chapter in Kyle Filipowski's career, and that definitely would have happened if he had lowered his shoulder and knocked out that weight kid that that tried to run past him on the court. Anything else before we get out of here, guys? As we get ready here for the upcoming week, Carolina has Saturday, of course, rivalry game, NC State, 4:00 on ESPN. Then on Tuesday versus Notre Dame at home. Both of those games are at home. 7:00 on ACC Network, and we'll be back right after that. So we'll review NC State and Notre Dame, and of course we'll get you ready for Duke March the 9th. That's a 6:30 p.m. game on ESPN. I'd imagine College Game Day will be in Durham. Anything you guys want to touch on before we get out?
Well, just notice that it seems like Hubert Davis is really settling into an 8-man rotation with Trimble and the Jalen's is really the only reserves are getting consistent playing time. And then like in the second half, even in the second halves of close games, he's really tightened it even more. I think the Jalen's only had 6 minutes in the second half against Miami and 5 against Virginia. So, there's talk about him expanding the rotation, but it's not really happening as we go down the stretch. And you just hope you don't see players being tired and making mistakes at the end of games because of that.
Yeah, we're not seeing like Zayden High and some of the other guys that we were seeing earlier get minutes. And that's kind of a Roy Williams thing. Roy would do that too. As he got through the conference, he would whittle down his rotation to about a hard 8 and kind of get to the NCAA tournament with his 8. And there's a 9th guy that can get plugged in there if need be, fouls, injury or whatever. Pete, your thoughts going forward into the upcoming week?
Yes, the same idea. I think I really like Jalen Washington in the game. I think he appears a little bit less, I don't know if confident is the right word, but assertive maybe offensively. I think he's kind of bought into the role of just being a rebounder, defensive player, trying to get some good minutes out that way. But I think he's valuable if he can get some offense going. He just doesn't seem to either have opportunities or be looking for them offensively. We're going to need some of those guys. And if you notice the last 2-3 games off the bench, we're not getting much point production, and we're going to need something off the bench. And then we've had it in spurts here and there from both those guys, from all 3 of them. But I think going into postseason, that's going to be pretty important.
So we'll be back next Wednesday. By the time we come back, they would have played Notre Dame, who no one can figure out. Again, Notre Dame just beat Wake Forest last night, but they're at the bottom of the standings. And then, of course, NC State, our rival, down the road. So I think we're in Raleigh for that one because they came to Chapel Hill for the first one, right? Yeah. So we'll review those and we'll preview Duke Carolina Part 2. Doesn't get any better than that. And by the time we get to that point, actually, by the time we get back to here next week, Carolina may have sewed up the 1 seed, right, or regular season championship if they win these 2 games. Isn't that right? If they win these 2 games,
right? They already can be no worse than a 2 seed. So if they beat State and Notre Dame because of the tiebreakers, they could lose at Duke and still get the number 1 seed. So
man, what a turnaround! Shout out to Hubert Davis before we get out of here, and the turnaround that the program's made in 12 months. Because at this point last year, it felt like as a fan, the team was just kind of hanging on. Like we were hoping we could get into the tournament. We were hoping for wins. Like we were hoping that we could figure this out like on the fly. And this year, I feel like the team feels close. You can feel it watching them on TV that they're actually friends. Like they hang out. There's a difference in teams where like there's a lot of camaraderie and you can see multiple guys hanging out all week long. That kind of like they enjoy each other's company. And then there's other teams where it's like a job. Like you don't really hang out. You can play together, but there's something just kind of missing with it. And my favorite sports teams of all time, when I look back and think on them, they had that camaraderie, like the 2015 Carolina Panthers. Like they had that, and it showed through the camera, through the game, through the play-by-play. You could tell these guys actually really enjoy each other's company. And I catch that vibe with this team, this Carolina team. I'm not saying that they're going to win it all or get to the Final Four or anything, but I feel pretty good about them in terms of the different situations they've been in so far this year against top talent this year, and they've succeeded for the most part. So we'll see what they do this week. Presented by Bet Online. You can find us on the Bleav Podcast Network. Please find us there, rate, subscribe. You can catch us each week. We'll be back next week with a new episode, again, previewing the upcoming Duke matchup and the reviewing the games against NC State and Notre Dame. So for Pete Chilcutt and R.L. Bynum, this is Desmond Johnson. You've been watching and listening to the Bleav in Hills Hoops podcast here on Bleav Podcast Networks.